too, because this time around, Diddy was brought in first. He was brought in about a couple minutes after 2 p.m. today, and we were all kind of waiting to see. We had heard mumblings that his mom might be in courtroom, that we were waiting for the children, but then nothing happened. But then, in another twist and turn, the children do walk in, but this time it was a lot smaller bunch than it was the last time. So last time you're having all of Diddy's children, except with the exception of Love, who is just a 2-year-old child, so she wasn't at court, but you had all of Diddy's children there except Love. But this time around, you just had Justin Combs and Christian Combs, meaning that there was no Quincy there today. Delilah and Jesse weren't there. Chance wasn't there. And the caretakers of his younger children who aren't of age just yet, they were not present inside the courtroom as well today.
He promised them fame and fortune, but instead, they found themselves trapped in nightmares they couldn't escape. Today, a former music executive breaks his 20-year silence about what really happened behind Sean Combs' golden doors. And what he reveals will change everything you thought you knew about hip-hop's darkest empire. You deserve to know what really happened. I'm working hard to build this channel, and I truly love your help. Why not hit subscribe and be part of this journey? Marcus Thompson remembers the exact moment he realized something was wrong with Diddy's world. It was 2003, a champagne-soaked party at the Plaza Hotel. Music executives mingling with models, the air thick with cigar smoke and promises of platinum records. But in the VIP section, behind velvet ropes and tinted glass, Thompson witnessed something that made his blood run cold. Diddy wasn't just signing artists, Thompson reveals, his voice still carrying traces of old fear. He was collecting souls. The contracts weren't just paperwork, they were rituals. I watched him make this young producer kneel on the marble floor, right there in front of everyone, and swear an oath. Not to the label, to him personally. The producer's name was Terrence Williams, a 24-year-old beatmaker from Atlanta with dreams bigger than his bank account. 3 weeks after that party, Williams vanished. His family received a wire transfer for $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement so thick it could stop bullets. When Thompson tried to reach out,
a disgraced hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs back in court today. The rapper appearing in a beige smock and pants for his pretrial hearing. Federal prosecutors are saying that they were on track to disclose all of the available evidence to the defense by the end of the year. Well, Diddy has been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn following his arrest in September in a federal sex trafficking case. Last week, Combs abandoned what was his 4th attempt to get released on bail. Joining me for more on this is ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky. So, Aaron, I know you just essentially left that courtroom. So what do we know about today's hearing?
Well, the prosecutors said they would disclose every piece of evidence that's in their possession by the end of the year. So by December 31st, the defense should have everything. And then the case is going to move toward trial in the spring of next year. Before that, the defense says it wants some clarity from the prosecutors about the scope of Combs' alleged criminal conduct, because right now, defense attorney Mark Agnifilo said the racketeering allegations that Combs faces, the defense believes are a little vague.
Diddy's security chief pulled him aside with a warning. Some questions cost more than money. By 2004, whispers about the freak-offs had begun circulating through the industry's underground channels. These weren't ordinary parties. They were carefully orchestrated performances where the line between pleasure and punishment dissolved like sugar and champagne. Thompson recalls finding a hidden recording studio beneath Diddy's Manhattan office, soundproofed walls covered in strange symbols, mixing boards stained with substances that weren't just spilled drinks. I asked one of the engineers what they recorded down there, Thompson says, his hands trembling slightly. He just looked at me with these dead eyes and said, "Not music." But what his own bodyguard discovered would reveal a nightmare running deeper than anyone imagined. Jerome Big J Wallace spent 15 years as Diddy's head of security, a mountain of a man who'd seen enough darkness to fill several lifetimes. In an exclusive interview conducted just days before the trial, Wallace finally broke his silence about what really happened in those locked hotel rooms. The first year, I thought it was just rich people being wild, Wallace explains, his deep voice barely above a whisper. Champagne, models, the usual celebrity excess. But then I started noticing patterns. The same young faces showing up at different hotels, always looking more broken than the time before. Wallace describes a night in 2007 at the Four Seasons when he was ordered to stand guard outside a suite for 14 hours straight, The sounds that leaked through the door weren't music or laughter. They were something else entirely. When the door finally opened, 3 girls stumbled out.
They're hunting this guy for major felonies, and Fiddy seems to be sitting on the sidelines cheering. Now, that could be for one or two reasons. One is he knows things or suspects things about Mr. Combs. The other one is that he's just got a real perverse sense of competition.
One thing I know for sure is that when it comes to our culture, sometimes we cannibalize our own more than anybody else. And, we've seen the former president of the United States inspire the country to turn into Spider-Man and climb up the Capitol to overthrow the government in the middle of an election. But yet we haven't seen his mugshot or seen his kids handcuffed. I've known Justin for probably 15 years. Quincy, one of his sons, and his other sons. Those are really good kids. So to see them in handcuffs, to see them put on display as criminals, or to be put into the conversation that they somehow are ushering underage kids into the compound for their dad to have their way with them. Those aren't the kids that I know.
Mascara streaked down their faces, unable to make eye contact. Behind them, Diddy emerged wearing a silk robe, his eyes glassy, a strange smile playing at his lips. He looked at me and said, "They're learning to be stars, Jay. Sometimes it hurts to shine." The breaking point came in 2012 during a private party in Miami. Wallace watched Diddy fly into a rage over a spilled drink, throwing a crystal decanter that shattered against the wall inches from a server's head. But it wasn't the violence that disturbed Wallace. It was what happened next. Diddy dropped to his knees, crawling across the broken glass, whispering to the empty corners of the room. He was talking to something that wasn't there. Wallace recalls, his massive frame shuddering at the memory, kept saying, "I paid my price. I paid my price," over and over. Yet it wasn't the violence that terrified his lawyer. It was what Diddy whispered to the empty corners of rooms. David Rosenberg had defended celebrities for 3 decades, but nothing prepared him for the moment Sean Combs' empire began to crumble from within. As lead defense attorney, Rosenberg witnessed the exact second his client transformed from mogul to monster.
Disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, once known for his lavish lifestyle and living large in his multi-million-dollar mansions, has a new home as he awaits trial in his federal sex trafficking case. Last week, the Bad Boy Founder's defense team unsuccessfully fought to keep the music producer out of federal jail after his arrest. Now his new digs once house other high-profile inmates, including R. Kelly, Fetty Wap, Sam Bankman-Fried, and Ghislaine Maxwell. Diddy is currently housed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, a stark difference from the glitz, glamour, and wealth in Hollywood and Star Island in Miami Beach, Florida. But MDC Brooklyn has been described as hell on earth with horrifying conditions. The facility, which now houses Diddy, opened in the early 90s and is the only federal jail in New York City after the Bureau of Prisons closed its Metropolitan Correctional Center in 2021 after many issues came to light in the wake of Jeffrey Epstein's suicide just 2 years earlier.
But is not criminal. Now, Abby, that video that you just spoke about was a few months ago when our team broke this disturbing video of Diddy violently assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, better known as the singer, her stage name, Cassie. Now, up until this point, when we broke this video, Diddy had denied the allegations against him. Cassie is one of 10 civil suits against Diddy, 9 of which he is accused directly of sexually assault. Up until that video, he denied everything. After that video came out, he changed his tone. He apologized for his conduct in that video. But I have to tell you, Abby, just as of last week, a former member of Danity Kane, which was one of the bands from Making the Band, Diddy's show that was on MTV, she sued him for sexual assault and other disturbing allegations, and he denied that. So he continues the denials, and he still maintains his innocence, even though he has been arrested tonight.
The flash drive arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning. Rosenberg recounts, adjusting his glasses with trembling fingers. Black, unmarked except for a piece of masking tape with one word, Cassie. What the drive contained was 47 minutes of hotel surveillance footage, crystal clear despite being shot in low light. The timestamp read March 5th, 2016. The location, Intercontinental Hotel, Century City. The content, unspeakable. I've seen evidence that made hardened prosecutors vomit, Rosenberg says quietly. But this was different.
Whenever they came inside the courtroom, and again, this was after Diddy was already sitting down at the defense table, he looked back immediately. He smiled. He beamed up. He waved at at his two sons, and just kind of gave them kind of a little bit of, it's a good to see you type of feeling. That's what I was gathering from inside that courtroom. Now, again, I want to remind our viewers that when we're inside federal court, again, there's no cameras, which, Jesse, I'm sure you have already mentioned that part. But, even for us journalists, with the exception of some who get a special permission of that, we just are relying on a notebook, a notepad, a pen, a pencil in order to kind of take notes to see what is all going on. I can't even take my Apple Watch inside that courtroom whenever there's a hearing. I have to turn that in. I have to turn my laptop in. Of course, I have to turn my phone in. So we're kind of just eye-watching everything that's going on. Now, when Christian and Justin came inside that courtroom, they were actually sitting just right across from me over on the left side of the gallery. So what I was seeing from both of his sons was a little bit of leg shaking, what I perceived to be a little prayer right before the hearing had actually started as well too. But again, I think their focus was maintaining a good face for their father, being supportive of their father, which you expect at this point because they've attended pretty much all of the hearings so far, with the exception of that emergency hearing that happened, I believe, back in October now. But then they kind of just stood and sat and just kind of listened to what was all kind of happening. Again, that court hearing was pretty quick. It was about 30 minutes long. I think all of us were kind of surprised that the hearing did last that short amount of time as opposed to last hearing, which was about 2 hours or so.
It wasn't just violence. It was systematic, calculated, like watching a predator who'd perfected his craft over decades. During pretrial meetings, Diddy's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He'd arrive hours late, clothes disheveled, muttering about rats in the walls and cameras in the light fixtures. Security reported finding him in his office at 3 a.m., standing on his desk, unscrewing bulbs while screaming about surveillance. One night, I found him in the conference room talking to an empty chair, Rosenberg reveals. He was negotiating with it, offering money, threatening lawsuits. When I asked who he was talking to, he looked at me with these hollow eyes and said, "The man who owns my real name." The final straw came when federal investigators delivered a second batch of evidence. 73 additional flash drives recovered from a hidden vault in Diddy's Hamptons estate. Each drive was labeled with initials. Each contained horrors that made the Cassie footage look tame. When federal investigators found the hidden tapes, even the prosecutor wasn't prepared for what they showed. Still here? That means this story matters to you too. If you haven't yet, please tap subscribe. It would mean the world to me as we uncover even more. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Martinez had prosecuted cartel leaders and serial killers, but the evidence against Sean Combs made her question everything she thought she knew about evil. Speaking anonymously to protect ongoing investigations, she describes the moment the case transcended mere criminality. "We found the vault behind a false wall in his guest house," Martinez reveals. Temperature-controlled, biometric locks, the works. Inside were hundreds of tapes dating back to 1997, but these weren't music videos or studio sessions. The footage showed elaborately staged parties that looked more like occult ceremonies. Participants wore masks, some animal, some geometric, all disturbing. Young women, many who appeared underage, were arranged in circles around makeshift altars decorated with symbols Martinez couldn't identify. In one tape from 2009, Diddy stands at the center wearing a crown of thorns, directing the activities like a conductor, she describes, her voice catching. He kept repeating this phrase, "payment for the pipeline." We still don't know what that means. Court records obtained exclusively by our team reveal testimony from 7 Jane Does, all former participants whose identities remain sealed. Their accounts describe drugs that induced paralysis while keeping victims conscious, rooms painted entirely black to disorient participants, and recording equipment hidden in everyday objects. Jane Doe, number 4, was 15 when she attended her first industry party. Martinez continues. She thought she was networking. Instead, she became part of what Diddy called his collection. She testified that he told her every empire needs its sacrifices. The most disturbing discovery came from a tape labeled simply "Insurance." It showed Diddy himself, alone in frame, speaking directly to the camera in what appeared to be a confessional. But halfway through, his demeanor changed. His voice dropped several octaves. His eyes rolled back. and he began speaking in what linguistic experts identified as backwards Latin. But it was Diddy's reaction to seeing himself on tape that revealed his true face. October 15th, 2024. Federal Courthouse, Southern District of New York. The day Sean Combs' carefully constructed persona shattered like glass on marble. Court reporter Janet Williams provides this exclusive account of what transpired in courtroom 318. It started during the prosecution's presentation of evidence. Williams recalls, her shorthand notes still vivid in her memory. They played the hotel footage first. Diddy sat perfectly still, face blank. But when they showed the ritual tapes, something changed. Witnesses described Diddy beginning to rock back and forth, muttering under his breath. At first, it seemed like prayers. Then the words became clearer. Not me, not me. I'm just the vessel, just the vessel. When his ex-girlfriend's testimony was read aloud, detailing years of abuse, manipulation, and forced participation in the freak-offs, Diddy's composure cracked completely. He leapt from his chair, pointing at empty air, screaming at invisible accusers. "You weren't there," he shrieked, his voice breaking into multiple registers. "You don't know what they demanded. The price for everything." Federal marshals moved to restrain him, but Diddy had already collapsed, convulsing on the courtroom floor. Medical staff rushed in as he began speaking in what witnesses described as different voices, some male, some female, some barely human. The creepiest part, Williams notes, checking her transcripts, was when he looked directly at Judge Harrison and said in this little girl's voice, "He made us dance until our feet bled, but the music never stopped." The court had to be cleared. Diddy was carried out on a stretcher, still muttering, still fighting invisible demons. His legal team sat shell-shocked, papers scattered across their table like debris after a bomb blast. 3 hours later, lead counsel filed a motion to withdraw from the case, citing irreconcilable differences and ethical concerns. The motion was granted. Diddy's empire had finally run out of lawyers willing to defend it. What investigators found in his abandoned penthouse would finally expose the man behind the empire. Detective Michael Brooks led the team that searched Diddy's abandoned Manhattan penthouse 6 months after his psychiatric commitment. What they found rewrote the final chapter of hip-hop's darkest story. The place was a tomb, Brooks describes, police report in hand. Molding food, dead plants, dust thick as carpet. But in the back bedroom, we found a door nobody had noticed before, steel reinforced, hidden behind a false bookshelf. Inside was what investigators dubbed the confession room. Barely 8 feet square, walls covered in scrawled writings, photographs, and what appeared to be contracts written in substances other than ink. A wooden chest sat in the center, "When they forget me," carved into its lid. The chest contained the real Sean Combs, not the mogul, not the producer, but the man who'd sold everything for fame. Polaroids showed young Diddy, maybe 20, participating in ceremonies that matched those from the seized tapes. Handwritten letters detailed the bargain he'd made, though with whom remained unclear. The most disturbing items were the journals, Brooks continues, hundreds of pages where he documented everything, every crime, every victim, every payment, but he wrote like he was proud, like he was keeping score. The final entry, dated just days before his arrest, read, "They think they've caught me, but they've only caught the shadow. The real me died in 1994. What walks in my skin serves older masters. And when this vessel breaks, another will take its place. The music never stops. The dance never ends. The price is always paid." Forensic psychologists studying the materials suggested Diddy suffered from a rare dissociative disorder, possibly triggered by early trauma. But Detective Brooks isn't convinced it's that simple. "In 30 years on the force, I've seen evil wear many masks," he says, closing the case file. "Sometimes the mask is all that's left." As rain falls on the abandoned penthouse, its windows dark and empty, one question remains. How many more empires in entertainment are built on similar foundations? How many more kings wear crowns of thorns? The music industry has always had its dark corners, but some corners hide entire kingdoms of shadow. And sometimes, when empires fall, we discover they were never really empires at all, just elaborate stages for ancient horrors, dressed in designer suits and platinum records. The victims are still healing. The investigations continue. And somewhere, in another boardroom, Another young artist signs a contract without reading the fine print. Because the music never stops, even when we wish it would.